John McCain. John Sidney McCain III is an American politician who currently serves as the senior United States Senator from Arizona. He was the Republican nominee for the 2008 U.S. presidential election. McCain followed his father and grandfather, both four-star admirals, into the United States Navy, graduating from the U.S. Naval Academy in 1958. He became a naval aviator, flying ground attack aircraft from aircraft carriers. During the Vietnam War, he was almost killed in the 1967 USS Forrestal fire. In October 1967, while on a bombing mission over Hanoi, he was shot down, seriously injured, and captured by the North Vietnamese. He was a prisoner of war until 1973. McCain experienced episodes of torture, and refused an out-of-sequence early repatriation offer. His war wounds have left him with lifelong physical limitations. He retired from the Navy as a captain in 1981 and moved to Arizona, where he entered politics. Elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 1982, McCain served 2 terms. He was first elected to the U.S. Senate in 1986, winning re-election easily 5 times, most recently in 2016. While generally adhering to conservative principles, McCain at times has had a media reputation as a maverick for his willingness to disagree with his party on certain issues. After being investigated and largely exonerated in a political influence scandal of the 1980s as a member of the Keating Five, he made campaign finance reform one of his signature concerns, eventually gaining passage of the McCain-Feingold Act in 2002. He is also known for his work in the 1990s to restore diplomatic relations with Vietnam, and for his belief that the Iraq War should have been fought to a successful conclusion. McCain has chaired the Senate Commerce Committee, opposed spending that he considered to be pork barrel, and played a key role in alleviating a crisis over judicial nominations with the bipartisan group known as the Gang of 14. McCain ran for the Republican nomination in 2000, but lost a heated primary season contest to George W. Bush of Texas. He secured the nomination in 2008 after coming back from early reversals, but was defeated by Democratic candidate Barack Obama in the general election, losing by a 365 to 173 electoral college margin and by 53 to 46% in the popular vote. He subsequently adopted more orthodox conservative stances and attitudes, and largely opposed actions of the Obama administration, especially in regard to foreign policy matters. By 2013, however, he had become a key figure in the Senate for negotiating deals on certain issues in an otherwise partisan environment. In 2015, McCain became chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Formative years and education. John McCain was born on August 29, 1936, at Coco Solo Naval Air Station in the Panama Canal Zone, to naval officer John S. McCain Jr. and Roberta McCain. He has a younger brother named Joe, and an elder sister named Sandy. At that time, the Panama Canal was under U.S. control. McCain's family tree includes Scots, Irish and English ancestors. Both his father and his paternal grandfather, John S. McCain Sr., became four-star United States Navy admirals. The McCain family followed his father to various naval postings in the United States and the Pacific. Altogether, he attended about 20 schools. In 1951, the family settled in Northern Virginia, and McCain attended Episcopal High School, a private preparatory boarding school in Alexandria. He excelled at wrestling, and graduated in 1954. Following in the footsteps of his father and grandfather, McCain entered the United States Naval Academy at Annapolis. There, he was a friend and informal leader for many of his classmates, and sometimes stood up for targets of bullying. He also became a lightweight boxer. McCain did well in academic subjects that interested him, such as literature and history, but studied only enough to pass subjects he struggled with, such as mathematics. He came into conflict with higher-ranking personnel, and did not always obey the rules, which contributed to a low-class rank, despite a high IQ. McCain graduated in 1958. Naval training, first marriage, and Vietnam assignment. McCain's early military career began when he was commissioned an ensign and started 2.5 years of training at Pensacola to become a naval aviator. While there, he earned a reputation as a partying man. He completed flight school in 1960, and became a naval pilot of ground attack aircraft, assigned to A-1 Skyrider squadrons aboard the aircraft carriers and in the Caribbean and Mediterranean seas. McCain began as a subpar flyer who was at times careless and reckless. During the early to mid-1960s, the planes he was flying crashed twice, and once collided with power lines, but he received no major injuries. His aviation skills improved over time, and he was seen as a good pilot, albeit one who tended to push the envelope in his flying. On July 3, 1965, McCain married Carol Shep, a model originally from Philadelphia. McCain adopted her 2 young children, Douglas and Andrew. He and Carol then had a daughter named Sidney. McCain requested a combat assignment, and was assigned to the aircraft carrier flying A-4 Skyhawks. His combat duty began when he was 30 years old, in mid-1967, when Forrestal was assigned to a bombing campaign, Operation Rolling Thunder, during the Vietnam War. Stationed in the Gulf of Tonkin, McCain and his fellow pilots became frustrated by micromanagement from Washington, and he would later write that, in all candor, "We thought our civilian commanders were complete idiots who didn't have the least notion of what it took to win the war." On July 29, 1967, McCain, by then a lieutenant commander, was near the epicenter of the USS Forrestal fire. He escaped from his burning jet, and was trying to help another pilot escape when a bomb exploded. McCain was struck in the legs and chest by fragments. The ensuing fire killed 134 sailors and took 24 hours to control. With the Forrestal out of commission, McCain volunteered for assignment with another aircraft carrier employed in Operation Rolling Thunder. Once there, he would be awarded the Navy Commendation Medal and the Bronze Star for missions flown over North Vietnam. Prisoner of war. McCain's capture and subsequent imprisonment began on October 26, 1967. He was flying his 23rd bombing mission over North Vietnam when his A-4E Skyhawk was shot down by a missile over Hanoi. McCain fractured both arms and a leg ejecting from the aircraft, and nearly drowned when he parachuted into Truck Bark Lake. Some North Vietnamese pulled him ashore, then others crushed his shoulder with a rifle butt and bayoneted him. McCain was then transported to Hanoi Main Hoa Lo prison, nicknamed the Hanoi Hilton. Although McCain was badly wounded, his captors refused to treat his injuries, beating and interrogating him to get information. He was given medical care only. When the North Vietnamese discovered that his father was a high-ranking admiral, his status as a prisoner of war made the front pages of major newspapers. McCain spent 6 weeks in the hospital while receiving marginal care. By then having lost in a chest cast, and with his gray hair turned white as snow, McCain was sent to a different camp on the outskirts of Hanoi in December 1967. Into a cell with 2 other Americans who did not expect him to live a week. In March 1968, McCain was put into solitary confinement, where he would remain for 2 years. In mid-1968, John S. McCain Jr. was named commander of all U.S. forces in the Vietnam theater, and the North Vietnamese offered McCain early release because they wanted to appear merciful for propaganda purposes, and also to show other POWs that elite prisoners were willing to be treated preferentially. McCain turned down the offer. He would only accept repatriation if every man taken in before him was released as well. Such early release was prohibited by the POW's interpretation of the military code of conduct, to prevent the enemy from using prisoners for propaganda. Officers were to agree to be released in the order in which they were captured. In August 1968, a program of severe torture began on McCain. He was subjected to rope bindings and repeated beatings every 2 hours, at the same time as he was suffering from dysentery. Further injuries led to the beginning of a suicide attempt, stopped by guards. Eventually, McCain made an anti-American propaganda confession. He has always felt that his statement was dishonorable, but as he later wrote, "I had learned what we all learned over there: every man has his breaking point. I had reached mine. Many American POWs were tortured and maltreated in order to extract confessions and propaganda statements. Virtually all of them eventually yielded something to their captors." McCain subsequently received 2 to 3 beatings weekly, because of his continued refusal to sign additional statements. McCain refused to meet with various anti-war groups seeking peace in Hanoi, wanting to give neither them nor the North Vietnamese a propaganda victory. From late 1969 onward, treatment of McCain and many of the other POWs became more tolerable, while McCain continued actively to resist the camp authorities. McCain and other prisoners cheered the U.S. Christmas bombing campaign of December 1972, viewing it as a forceful measure to push North Vietnam to terms. Altogether, McCain was a prisoner of war in North Vietnam for 5.5 years. He was released on March 14, 1973. His wartime injuries left him permanently incapable of raising his arms above his head. Commanding officer, liaison to Senate, and second marriage. McCain's return to the United States reunited him with his family. His wife Carol had suffered her own crippling ordeal due to an automobile accident in December 1969. McCain became a celebrity of sorts as a return POW. McCain underwent treatment for his injuries, including months of grueling physical therapy, and attended the National War College at Fort McNair in Washington, D.C. during 1973–1974. Having been rehabilitated, by late 1974, McCain had his flight status reinstated, and in 1976 he became commanding officer of a training squadron stationed in Florida. He improved the unit's flight readiness and safety records, and won the squadron its first ever meritorious unit commendation. During this period in Florida, McCain had extramarital affairs, and his marriage began to falter, for which he later would accept blame. McCain served as the Navy's liaison to the U.S. Senate beginning in 1977. In retrospect, he has said that this represented his real entry into the world of politics and the beginning of my second career as a public servant. His key behind-the-scenes role gained congressional financing for a new supercarrier against the wishes of the Carter administration. In April 1979, McCain met Cindy Lou Hensley, a teacher from Phoenix, Arizona, whose father had founded a large beer distributorship. They began dating, and he urged his wife Carol to grant him a divorce, which she did in February 1980, with the uncontested divorce taking effect in April 1980. The settlement included 2 houses, and financial support for her ongoing medical treatments due to her 1969 car accident. They would remain on good terms. McCain and Hensley were married on May 17, 1980, with Senators William Cohen and Gary Hart attending as groomsmen. McCain's children did not attend, and several years would pass before they reconciled. John and Cindy McCain entered into a prenuptial agreement that kept most of her family's assets under her name. They would always keep their finances apart and file separate income tax returns. McCain decided to leave the Navy. It was doubtful whether he would ever be promoted to the rank of full admiral, as he had poor annual physicals and had been given no major sea command. His chances of being promoted to rear admiral were better, but McCain declined that prospect, as he had already made plans to run for Congress, and said he could do more good there. McCain retired from the Navy on April 1, 1981. As a captain, he was designated as disabled and awarded a disability pension. Upon leaving the military, he moved to Arizona. His 17 military awards and decorations include the Silver Star, Legion of Merit, Distinguished Flying Cross, Bronze Star, and Navy Commendation Medal, for actions before, during, and after his time as a POW. U.S. Congressman. McCain set his sights on becoming a congressman, because he was interested in current events, was ready for a new challenge, and had developed political ambitions during his time as Senate liaison. Living in Phoenix, he went to work for Hensley & Co. His new father-in-law Jim Hensley's large Anheuser-Busch beer distributorship, as vice president of public relations at the distributorship. He gained political support among the local business community, meeting powerful figures such as banker Charles Keating Jr., real estate developer Fife Symington III, and newspaper publisher Darrow Duke Tully. In 1982, McCain ran as a Republican for an open seat in Arizona's 1st Congressional District, which was being vacated by 30-year incumbent Republican John Jacob Rhodes. A newcomer to the state, McCain was hit with charges of being a carpetbagger. McCain responded to a voter making that charge with what a Phoenix Gazette columnist would later describe as the most devastating response to a potentially troublesome political issue I've ever heard. With the assistance of local political endorsements, his Washington connections, as well as money that his wife lent to his campaign, McCain won a highly contested primary election. He then easily won the general election in the heavily Republican district. In 1983, McCain was elected to lead the incoming group of Republican representatives, and was assigned to the House Committee on Interior Affairs. Also that year, he opposed creation of a federal Martin Luther King Jr. Day, but admitted in 2008, "I was wrong," and eventually realized that in time to give full support in 1990 for a state holiday in Arizona. McCain's politics at this point were mainly in line with President Ronald Reagan, including support for Reaganomics, and he was active on Indian affairs bills. He supported most aspects of the foreign policy of the Reagan administration, including its hardline stance against the Soviet Union, and policy towards Central American conflicts, such as backing the Contras in Nicaragua. McCain opposed keeping U.S. Marines deployed in Lebanon, citing unattainable objectives, and subsequently criticized President Reagan for pulling out the troops too late. In the interim, the 1983 Beirut barracks bombing killed hundreds. McCain won re-election to the House easily in 1984, and gained a spot on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. In 1985, he made his first return trip to Vietnam, and also traveled to Chile, where he met with its military junta ruler, General Augusto Pinochet. Growing family. In 1984, McCain and Cindy had their first child together, daughter Megan, followed 2 years later by son John Sidney IV, and in 1988 by son James. In 1991, Cindy McCain brought an abandoned 3-month-old girl needing medical treatment to the U.S. from a Bangladeshi orphanage run by Mother Teresa. The McCains decided to adopt her, and named her Bridget. First 2 terms in U.S. Senate. McCain's Senate career began in January 1987, after he defeated his Democratic opponent, former state legislator Richard Kimball, by 20 percentage points in the 1986 election. McCain succeeded longtime American conservative icon and Arizona fixture Barry Goldwater upon the latter's retirement as U.S. Senator from Arizona. With First Lady Nancy Reagan at left, March 1987 Senator McCain became a member of the Armed Services Committee, with which he had formerly done his Navy liaison work. He also joined the Commerce Committee and the Indian Affairs Committee. He continued to support the Native American agenda, as first a House member and then a senator, and as a lifelong gambler with close ties to the gambling industry. McCain was one of the main authors of the 1988 Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, which codified rules regarding Native American gambling enterprises. McCain was also a strong supporter of the Gramm-Rudman legislation that enforced automatic spending cuts in the case of budget deficits. McCain soon gained national visibility. He delivered a well-received speech at the 1988 Republican National Convention, was mentioned by the press as a short-list vice presidential running mate for Republican nominee George H.W. Bush, and was named chairman of Veterans for Bush. McCain became embroiled in a scandal during the 1980s, as one of 5 United States senators comprising the so-called Keating Five. Between 1982 and 1987, McCain had received $112,000 in lawful political contributions from Charles Keating, Jr. and his associates at Lincoln Savings and Loan Association, along with trips on Keating's jets that McCain belatedly repaid in 1989. In 1987, McCain was one of the 5 senators whom Keating contacted in order to prevent the government's seizure of Lincoln, and McCain met twice with federal regulators to discuss the government's investigation of Lincoln. In 1999, McCain said, "The appearance of it was wrong. It's a wrong appearance when a group of senators appear in a meeting with a group of regulators, because it conveys the impression of undue and improper influence. And it was the wrong thing to do." In the end, McCain was cleared by the Senate Ethics Committee of acting improperly or violating any law or Senate rule, but was mildly rebuked for exercising poor judgment in his 1992 re-election bid. The Keating Five affair was not a major issue, and he won handily, gaining 56% of the vote to defeat Democratic community and civil rights activist Claire Sargent and independent former governor Evan Mecham, with his mother Roberta, son Jack, daughter Megan, and wife Cindy McCain developed a reputation for independence during the 1990s. He took pride in challenging party leadership and establishment forces, becoming difficult to categorize politically. As a member of the 1991 to 1993 Senate Select Committee on POW/MIA Affairs, chaired by fellow Vietnam War veteran and Democrat John Kerry, McCain investigated the Vietnam War POW/MIA issue to determine the fate of U.S. service personnel listed as missing in action during the Vietnam War. The committee's unanimous report stated there was no compelling evidence that proves that any American remains alive in captivity in Southeast Asia, helped by McCain's efforts. In 1995, the U.S. normalized diplomatic relations with Vietnam. McCain was vilified by some POW-MIA activists who, unlike the Arizona senator, believed large numbers of Americans were still held against their will in Southeast Asia. Since January 1993, McCain has been chairman of the International Republican Institute, an organization partly funded by the U.S. government that supports the emergence of political democracy worldwide. In 1993 and 1994, McCain voted to confirm President Clinton's nominees Stephen Breyer and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, whom he considered to be qualified for the U.S. Supreme Court. He would later explain that, under our Constitution, it is the president's call to make. McCain had also voted to confirm nominees of Presidents Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush, including Robert Bork and Clarence Thomas. McCain attacked what he saw as the corrupting influence of large political contributions from corporations, labor unions, other organizations, and wealthy individuals, and he made this his signature issue. Starting in 1994, he worked with Democratic Wisconsin Senator Russ Feingold on campaign finance reform. The McCain-Feingold bill attempted to put limits on soft money. The efforts of McCain and Feingold were opposed by some of the moneyed interests targeted by incumbents in both parties, by those who felt spending limits impinged on free political speech and might be unconstitutional as well, and by those who wanted to counterbalance the power of what they saw as media bias. Despite sympathetic coverage in the media, initial versions of the McCain-Feingold Act were filibustered and never came to a vote. The term, "maverick Republican," became a label frequently applied to McCain, and he has also used it himself. In 1993, McCain opposed military operations in Somalia. Another target of his was pork barrel spending by Congress, and he actively supported the Line Item Veto Act of 1996, which gave the president power to veto individual spending items, but was ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court in 1998. In the 1996 presidential election, McCain was again on the short list of possible vice presidential picks, this time for Republican nominee Bob Dole. The following year, Time magazine named McCain as one of the 25 most influential people in America. In 1997, McCain became chairman of the powerful Senate Commerce Committee. He was criticized for accepting funds from corporations and businesses under the committee's purview, but in response said the small contributions he received were not part of the big money nature of the campaign finance problem. McCain took on the tobacco industry in 1998, proposing legislation that would increase cigarette taxes in order to fund anti-smoking campaigns, discourage teenage smokers, increase money for health research studies, and help states pay for smoking-related health care costs. Supported by the Clinton administration, but opposed by the industry and most Republicans, the bill failed to gain cloture. Start of third term in the U.S. Senate. McCain won re-election to a third Senate term in November 1998, prevailing in a landslide over his Democratic opponent, environmental lawyer Ed Ranger. In the February 1999 Senate trial following the impeachment of Bill Clinton, McCain voted to convict the president on both the perjury and obstruction of justice counts, saying Clinton had violated his sworn oath of office. In March 1999, McCain voted to approve the NATO bombing campaign against the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, saying that the ongoing genocide of the Kosovo War must be stopped, and criticizing past Clinton administration inaction. Later in 1999, McCain shared the Profiling Courage Award with Feingold for their work in trying to enact their campaign finance reform. Although the bill was still failing repeated attempts to gain cloture, In August 1999, McCain's memoir Faith of My Fathers, co-authored with Mark Salter, was published. A reviewer observed that its appearance seems to have been timed to the unfolding presidential campaign. The most successful of his writings, it received positive reviews, became a bestseller, and was later made into a TV film. The book traces McCain's family background and childhood, covers his time at Annapolis and his service before and during the Vietnam War, concluding with his release from captivity in 1973. According to one reviewer, it describes the kind of challenges that most of us can barely imagine. It's a fascinating history of a remarkable military family. 2000 presidential campaign. McCain announced his candidacy for president on September 27, 1999, in Nashua, New Hampshire, saying he was staging a fight to take our government back from the power brokers and special interests, and return it to the people and the noble cause of freedom it was created to serve. The leader for the Republican nomination was Texas Governor George W. Bush, who had the political and financial support of most of the party establishment. McCain focused on the New Hampshire primary, where his message appealed to independents. He traveled on a campaign bus called the Straight Talk Express. He held many town hall meetings, answering every question voters asked, in a successful example of retail politics, and he used free media to compensate for his lack of funds. One reporter later recounted that McCain talked all day long with reporters on his Straight Talk Express bus. He talked so much that sometimes he said things that he shouldn't have, and that's why the media loved him. On February 1, 2000, he won New Hampshire's primary with 49% of the vote to Bush's 30%. The Bush campaign and the Republican establishment feared that a McCain victory in the crucial South Carolina primary might give his campaign unstoppable momentum, favorable, unfavorable ratings. 1999 to 2009, the Arizona Republic would write that the McCain-Bush primary contest in South Carolina has entered national political law as a low watermark in presidential campaigns, while the New York Times called it a painful symbol of the brutality of American politics. A variety of interest groups that McCain had challenged in the past ran negative ads. Bush borrowed McCain's earlier language of reform, and declined to dissociate himself from a veterans activist who accused McCain of having abandoned the veterans on POW, MIA and Agent Orange issues. Incensed, McCain ran out accusing Bush of lying and comparing the governor to Bill Clinton, which Bush said was about as low a blow as you can give in a Republican primary. An anonymous smear campaign began against McCain, delivered by push polls, faxes, emails, flyers, and audience plants. The smears claimed that McCain had fathered a black child out of wedlock, that his wife Cindy was a drug addict, that he was a homosexual, and that he was a Manchurian candidate, who was either a traitor or mentally unstable from his North Vietnam POW days. The Bush campaign strongly denied any involvement with the attacks. McCain lost South Carolina on February 19, with 42% of the vote to Bush's 53%. In part, because Bush mobilized the state's evangelical voters and outspent McCain. The win allowed Bush to regain lost momentum. McCain would say of the rumor spreaders, "I believe that there is a special place in hell for people like those." According to one report, the South Carolina experience left McCain in a very dark place. McCain's campaign never completely recovered from his South Carolina defeat, although he did rebound partially by winning in Arizona and Michigan a few days later. He made a speech in Virginia Beach that criticized Christian leaders, including Pat Robertson and Jerry Falwell, as divisive conservatives, declaring, "We embrace the fine members of the religious conservative community. But that does not mean that we will pander to their self-appointed leaders. McCain lost the Virginia primary on February the 29th, and on March 7 lost 9 of the 13 primaries on Super Tuesday to Bush. With little hope of overcoming Bush's delegate lead, McCain withdrew from the race on March 9, 2000. He endorsed Bush 2 months later, and made occasional appearances with the Texas governor during the general election campaign. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe below. Please like and subscribe below.